Welcome back. We made it, episode 8. I'm Sam Morgan, and I've transferred. I'm no longer at Go-Round Community College. We've made it all the way to Gur. Isn't that exciting? The year of the beast. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to prepare for the world's biggest Age of Sigmar 3 event. We're back. So I took about a month off. Just it's a great refresher at the end of any edition, I think, just to take a step back. I don't think there was necessarily anything particularly interesting to say to sort of close that chapter, to close Age of Sigmar 2nd edition. Fair play to anyone that was out there still pumping out content and doing battle reports and all of that sort of stuff, but I just certainly couldn't get motivated to do that myself. Probably the most interesting thing that's happened in the past month is the release of Crab. So just give a little shout out to Hail Crab, and I think let's push on and get stuck into today's episode. So actually, before we do that, I do want to rebuke one of the worst takes ever, and it's one that I've seen popping up as the rules for 3rd edition have been progressively drip fed to us, and we have these brave souls out there who are actually willing to have an opinion. Say this doesn't look particularly good. Coherency looks like a worry, or this unit seems to be a little bit overcosted for what it can do. And then they're sort of shot down. You don't have the whole picture. And I just sort of think, like, you can make an informed assessment based on your understanding of the broad ecosystem without the full picture. That's completely reasonable. It's equally reasonable for that to adapt and change, to grow over time. So I just want to, publicly shoot down that brigade. And there's a few of them, particularly on Twitter, where they like to say, "Hang on a tick. Wait till you see it all. I'm sure they've thought of it." And I saw this quote. It's very funny. So it goes, "The brave may not live forever, but the cautious do not live at all." And I heard that on a Shady track. So she's a grime artist. So, UK rap, hip hop, that sort of stuff. And I thought it was a pretty boss thing. And then I looked it up to make sure I got the quote right. And it turns out she's quoting the Princess Diary. So same energy, I guess. So let's talk about the topic of today, and that's how to prepare for the world's biggest event. And in order to do that, I think the best starting point is to have a quick look at the history of this event, both my personal history and the event more broadly. So Cancon is the world's biggest Age of Sigmar event. The past 2 years, the player numbers have exceeded 200 players. It's held annually on the Australia Day long weekend in Canberra. And it's called Cancon. It's not called Call to Glory. It's not called Age of Sigmar Grand World Tournament, anything like that. It is part of a bigger convention. So we have numerous systems there, traders, we have painting competitions, we have all sorts of things. And I literally couldn't think of a worse time of the year for a convention to be held in what is ostensibly a boiling hot dust bowl. So you get a couple of hundred fat, smelly nerds in a tin shed with poor air conditioning and poor ventilation. But nonetheless, this is going to be my 9th Cancon. Touch wood, fingers crossed, if it proceeds next year. And over those previous 8, I've hit 4 systems, and I absolutely love it. It's a pilgrimage every year, and I get to catch up with friends who I literally only see at Cancon. So big shout out to Aaron Graham, who won't listen to this cast because he doesn't play Age of Sigmar, but is a guy that I spend a lot of time with every Cancon weekend, and I look forward to catching up with him in Jan. The Age of Sigmar side of things is hosted by Heralds of War, so the pioneers in terms of Australian Age of Sigmar content, the first big podcast out there, and really put Australian Age of Sigmar on the map. And it's got 2 TOs, so it's headed up by Dennis and his offsider Clint. So big love to both Dennis and Clint for all of the work that they put in it with an event of that size and scale. That they literally have a team of 10 or 11 people that are there to help over the course of the weekend, doing numerous things. And notwithstanding the benefits you get from being part of a big convention in terms of the number of people that come through, the foot traffic, the global visibility. You also have a number of limitations. So Dennis and Clint and the team have to put up with the Cancon organisers and their rules around ticket release and their rules around setting up the tables and terrain. And certainly if we were to move away from the convention and make it independent, I think it would make their lives a lot easier. But they're doing I think they're doing the right thing by the community by nesting us in part of a bigger scene. So that's Cancon, the convention. That's Cancon, the event. Then in terms of my personal performance, I've done a little graph here. So year one, this was the final year of 8th edition Warhammer. I probably played over 100 practice games in the lead up to that event. And I was running Kairos with Mixed Demons, which was the bane of 8th edition Warhammer, and managed to play off in the final round for first place with Charles Black, a well-known Age of Sigmar player in Australia now, someone that's going to represent Australia at Worlds. And Charles and I fought out a 0-0 draw. We fought out a 10-10, which was not an uncommon result back in the day. And it popped me back down to fifth overall. So ended up 5th in the last one there. Took a couple of years off, and when I came back to the first Age of Sigmar event, big 220 player event, I managed to snag 20th. So I had dropped off a little bit, but it was still a respectable result, and I think I was maybe the second or third highest order player or something of that nature. Maybe there was a couple ahead of me. I don't remember, to be honest. And then last year, I managed to get my best ever tournament result. So the channel art sort of reflects this, and I finished 169th, which is the lowest I've ever finished at an event by over 100 places. So I'm pretty proud of that achievement. And based on that trajectory, we've gone 5 to 24-fold, 20 to 168-fold, 160 16-fold is 2,704th I'm tracking for next year. So that would be quite an achievement at a 200-player event. So the less said of that, the better, I think. Let's focus on improving rather than continuing that regression. So the goal for this year, I'm going to put it on the table now nice and early. With 6 months out, I want to finish top 10. And I think top 10 is realistically a 5-1. I get that some people set themselves the ambitious goal of top 1 or a podium, but I think there are too many factors outside of my control, particularly in a field that large, that would dictate the final standing. So I think if you finish with a 5-1, you've had a pretty good weekend, and you've probably managed to eke out the best that you can from your list. And in order to prepare, in order to sort of utilize this next 6 months of practice time and ensure that I'm being as efficient as I can in terms of my practice, I've decided that I'm going to employ some design principles. So we're going to be using the double diamond for design. So this is a piece of design theory that came out of the UK. Gosh, must have been 15 years ago now, and has progressively been refined and enhanced over that intervening period, and is something that's really repeatable and scalable, and something that you can apply to problems of practice, localized issues you're trying to resolve, and systemic problems as well. And in this case, the problem that we're trying to solve is how do you do as well as you can at the world's biggest Age of Sigmar tournament. So I'll quickly talk through the principles of the model today, and then I'm going to talk through 2 lists that I've designed specifically for Age of Sigmar 3 that I'm going to start to test and iterate over the next couple of months. They're 2 of a suite of lists that I have. I'm running a short list at the moment with about 8 or 9 factions on it, and that's obviously subject to change over time, but as a starting point, I've narrowed it down to probably about the top 10 factions that I'd like to play at the event. And I'll just talk you through the process we're going to be using. So basically the model employs a problem space and a solution space, and the idea being that first we need to understand the problem before we try and solve it, and each of those is split into a diamond, and the diamond is a visual representation of what we'll be doing. We'll be using really divergent thinking, and then once we've got all of the information, we've done all of the research, we'll really analyze and synthesize that information, and we'll be defining the problem. And then once we've got a proper problem definition, that's when we'd start to focus on what our list looks like and how our list sort of plays into the pack and then those sorts of things. So as an example, if we were to run through some of the prevailing threats from the end of 2nd edition Age of Sigmar, we might talk about things like Lumineth Wardens being able to project mortals at a really significant range without any line of sight limitations. We might talk about things like teleporting flamers that then shoot you with rend. We might talk about things like Fangs of Sotek Skinks being able to take a parting shot, but equally being able to teleport around with multiple buffs on and shoot you. And then you might start to get a sense of, well, the issue in this meta is shooting. And then you would start to think about, well, what might some of the solutions to shooting be once you'd synthesized it down to a particular thing you were trying to solve. And then you might start looking at units like, for instance, a Marathi that can teleport through Calebron and the Bringy Dingy, or you might look at things like Knights of the Empty Throne who can pile in 6 inches and therefore avoid the Skink's parting shot and then can't be retreated from. Or you might look at units, if you're a particularly clever player, you might look at units like Icefall Yetis that fight at the start of the combat phase and equally have a 6-inch pile in. And when you start to properly understand the problem that it is you're trying to solve, the solution to the problem becomes a lot clearer and is actually in response to the problem, rather than what we sometimes see with Age of Sigmar, where people will bring an all-comers or a generic list, but it doesn't, and it's able to get them up to the top tables, but it doesn't have the specific tools it requires in order to get through that final hurdle, which is the S-tier army. So an obvious response to the S-tier armies is also to take an S-tier army, and ultimately that might be what I end up doing, but at this stage that's not the plan. So I want to try and come up with something that's still a little bit off meta, and I want to come up with something that feels a little bit unique, but is able to respond to all of the things in the meta that are dominating at the time. So where we start when we're trying to determine, well, what's the problem, right? We know nothing about Age of Sigmar 3. So we have a sense, we know what the grand strategies are, we know what the scenarios are, we know what the points are now, but we don't actually know what that looks like in practice. We haven't seen it enough on the table to understand Unit X is particularly good in this meta because it's able to help you score this secondary and because it's able to hold this objective or whatever it might be. Like, people can theory craft as much as they like, but in reality we've got to get some games in on the table to validate those assumptions that we've got. So I'm really excited about this first little 3-month period where I'm going to focus almost exclusively on the problem. So I've got some lists that I'm going to be prototyping and testing, but I don't care if I go 0-20, I don't care if I go 0-50 between now and say October, November, because this is really a learning space. This is about picking up as much data and as much information as we can so that we can then sift through that and understand, what do we think the armies that are on the top tables at Cancon 2022 are going to look like, and therefore what's our army going to look like to either create problems for them or to solve the problems that they're creating for everyone else. And I think that this process is something that's best, to be actually demonstrated rather than discussed. So I'm going to keep coming back to this and this diagram to sort of show where we are over the next couple of months. But at the moment here's my arrow. We're here. We might even be behind here. You know what I mean? We've got so little information at the moment in terms of real data. And for me, the first big event that I'll be going to will be the Toowoomba Open. So that one's coming up in late August. And obviously that's contingent to being able to fly, which, coming from Victoria, that's been a real problem for me this year to date. I've had to drop from 2 different interstate tournaments, but fingers crossed we can get our act together and I can start getting out to other events. And once we've started to figure out the problem, then I get the opportunity to iterate. It's just iterate, and it's the theory hammering, understanding sort of what my strengths are as well, I think, as a player. So doing a bit of an analysis of, well, what are the things that I'm good at, and how can I ensure that I'm really utilizing those strengths. So at the moment, I feel like in Age of Sigmar 2, 2 of my strengths were screening and trading, and those both feel like things that are going to see less play in in Age of Sigmar 3, screening because of the coherency rules, and trading because of the overall increase in models, the overall increase in points rather, and therefore reduction in models that we're seeing across the board. So I still want to figure out a way of shoehorning those two play styles, for lack of a better word, shoehorning those two play styles of both screening and trading into my lists, because I feel like they're going to be skills that fall off in this edition, and fewer people will be utilizing them. Therefore, that could be another advantage. Conversely, they could be terrible. They could just make me worse. So I need to test and practice to figure that out, and I've got to really work the problem. And that's also a thing around collaboration. So I know a lot of people that do well at events, they like to keep their list under lock and key. They like to keep their strategy very close to their chest. And I understand the reason for that. It doesn't give other people an opportunity then to plan for their list. It doesn't give people an opportunity to plan for counterplay. But I'm going to do the opposite. And my intent is to collaborate with as many people as I can. And I'm really fortunate that I've got good friends over in the UK Worlds team. I've got good friends in the American Worlds team. I've got friends over in New Zealand who may or may not go to the event. It doesn't matter. I'm going to lean on those people. They're outside of my meta, but they can give me that global perspective. And then locally, I'm just going to try and play the best players as often as I can to really test my list against them and the strong lists that they take, maybe to supplement their lesser generalship. All right. So that's the model. I've used this before in other contexts, and it's really, really effective. And I think it translates over to Age of Sigmar effectively as well. It may have just sounded like stupid, consultant doublespeak, but in the real world, this does have application. So hopefully it can port over. Let's jump into the lists. I really want to talk about Age of Sigmar 3 lists. I'm so excited for this. All right. This is a Skaven army that I've been building since we were in lockdown the first time last year. So I was going a little bit crazy working through all the books, and I came across a build that I liked, and that my friend Luke Morton had been running. Unfortunately, Luke ran it before me, so he might claim it as his own if it's a good one. If it's bad, I'm sure he'll just say bin or use the bin emoji. Few are those that know of the ruthless assassins of Clan Degenerate. Fewer still are those who live to tell their tale. All right, what do we got in this list? We've got Screech as the general. We've got a Verminlord Deceiver with the Cube of Mists. We then have 110 Night Runners, 25 Gutter Runners, and a Soul Snare Shackle. So let's just talk through what each of those pieces do individually, and then let's talk through how they operate collectively as a cohesive army. So Screech is the Swiss Army knife of this list. He is from Master Clan, so every time he uses a command ability on a 5+, I generate an additional command point, which obviously in a meta which is thirsty for command points, that is a very relevant rule. Being a Verminlord, he comes with an innate 5+ after save and a bravery debuff, which are both really good in this sort of meta, I think. And then he is the Swiss Army knife of all of the Verminlords, because basically he gets a little bit of each of their rules. Each hero phase, at the start of my hero phase, he chooses one. So there's one that's knowledge of the arcane, which is adding to casting, dispelling, and unbinding rolls. That couples really nicely with the faction terrain for Skaven. The Norholes already give you +1 to cast. He's then got knowledge of flesh crafting, which is heal D3 wounds. Now there's a heroic action which also enables him to heal D3 wounds, so he could potentially heal up to 6 wounds in a hero phase. There's then the knowledge of the Plague Brewing, and that gives him mortal wounds on the hit of a 6 for his Plague Reaper. And the Plague Reaper comes in with 8 attacks, so that could potentially be really useful. There's the knowledge of Shadow Striking, which is neg1 to hit, which is amazing. If you go first and this guy's got a 5+ after save, and he's got a 4+ save, and he casts Mystic Shield on himself, so he's on a 3+ save, and then all of a sudden he's giving himself neg1 to hit, that's terrific. That has really good application, particularly in conjunction with the Verminlord Deceiver, who's innately -2 to hit. He's then got knowledge of Warp Tech, and this is my favourite one. The Doomglaive that he's carrying has a ring characteristic of 3. So Doomglaive has range 3, 6 attacks. He could be, with his heroic action, he could be 6 attacks, 2s to hit, 2s to wound, Ren 3, damage D3 +1 with flaming swords. Like, that is insane. 3-inch range, so you can do, 4 damage in attack. You can do 24 damage at Ren 3 with a 3-inch range. That is bonkers. If I just say that to my opponent, that means they have to protect characters in different ways. Like, you know what I mean? That's terrific. And then he's got another one, which is the Knowledge of the Warrior. Just add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made by this model. The reason that one becomes important is because the generic command ability, add 1 to hit, can only be used once in the combat phase, right? So if you've used this on him, you could also then use +1 to hit on your Deceiver if you need both of your Vermin Lords being more accurate. So that's a terrific combination. His command ability is reroll 1s to wound, which you're almost never going to use because the Deceivers reroll all failed to wound for all of those Night Runners and Gutter Runners, but there are some circumstances where you would pop that one. And then his spell is fantastic. Cast on an 8, pick a unit within 13, roll 13 dice. For each 4+, they take a mortal, and you gain a clan rat. So you might have already noticed that this army has 16 dispensable units. Well, you add him casting 2 or 3 times a game for an additional 2 or 3 units. And the way that this army plays is that it wants your opponent to be pinned in, to not move, and for you to outscore them while they progressively table you. So if I'm able to get clan rat screens, particularly if I'm able to do, say, 5 mortal wounds, this is the perfect situation, right? Do 5 mortal wounds, summon a unit of 5 clan rats, so they're not subjected to the bad coherency rules, they only have the good coherency rules. And then pop them in a line in front of a line of Night Runners just as an additional screen. That's terrific. So I love Screech. I think the fact that he snuck through at 330 is an absolute steal. And I wish that when they do the errata, that Screech gains a rule that some of the other unique characters in other books have, which is he's your general even if he's not your general, because then I could get another Master Clan character in there, and I would love to have a Screech and a Warpseer. At the moment it's Screech or a Warpseer. They're both terrific, but yeah, that would be really nice. Next up is the Deceiver. The Deceiver does something brilliant in this list. He teleports either himself or Screech 6 inches away from your opponent, and that's coupled with the Soul Snare Shackles. So the Shackles, they've got a new War Scroll. It's cast on a 7, has a range of 12. Units within 6 can't run or charge, and on a 6, they take D3 mortal wounds in their movement phase. Units within 6 can't run or charge. So you make a little triangle out of it because there's 3 shackles, and you create this big bubble, right? And the problem generally is that it's only got a casting range of 12. But what the Vermin Lord Deceiver allows you to do is teleport. You teleport to next to a gnaw hole, you cast shackles, and then in your movement phase, you teleport back through the gnaw hole behind your line, so that the risk of you, being then attacked or killed or whatever, it is significantly diminished. And if you've got a big brain, you can set this up in such a way that you teleport that second time, but still stay within 30 of the shackles. So anyway, just awesome, just really, really awesome. And he's got an artifact called the Cube of Mists. This is another negative play experience to go with the shackles and the teleporting. And what it does is if he's within 6th of a unit at the start of the combat phase, there's got a big buff under the new rules where start of phase abilities happen before start of phase activations. He can pop the Cube of Mists. They can't pile in, and they're neg 1 to hit. That is phenomenal. There are so many times when a person requires the pile in to get to that unit at the back, or to get those extra models scoring an objective, or to get out of your range, whatever it might be. But piling in is obviously a fantastic rule. There's a reason Alapexes are so widely used and hated, and this guy has it in his kit bag, which is just fantastic. And he also comes with the 5-up after save and all the standard Vermin Lord stuff. Next up, we've got 110 Night Runners spread across 11 units. These guys have a pre-game move, so they can do some interesting screening. They have the run and shoot ability, 6s to hit from them. They have a shooting attack, 6s to hit explode, so an additional hit. The raw volume of those hits, and then the Vermin Lord Deceiver's command ability, which can be used in either the hero or shooting phase, giving them rerolled wounds, means that they actually can do pretty good damage over the course of a game. Like, just hypothetically, best case scenario, right? No Night Runners die, 550 shots, perfect, amazing. They're supported by 25 Gutter Runners in 5 units of 5. I've mentioned coherency a number of times already. Being in units of 5 is excellent. These guys have quality of attack, so they can actually go and kill a hero with their combat profile. And then their shooting profile is also better. They have deep strike. So, in terms of the grand strategies, what have we got? Like 8 grand strategies at our disposal. Half of them are having 1+ units alive. So like 1+ wizards, 1+ priests, 1+ monsters. But then the important one for me is the hold the line, which is 1+ battle line. Let's see if I can remember. What are the other ones? Kill all enemy heroes, kill their general while your general's alive. Hold more terrain and have more units alive, so i.e. table them. So anyway, that was good. The fact that these guys are all battle line means that I take hold the line, and if I need to, I can deploy gutter runners in opposite corners, right? And almost every game, I can ensure that a 65-point unit of gutter runners is winning me 3 grand strategy points, which over the course of an event is obviously really significant. So that's the list. What it does is it pushes towards you, it encircles you, but it doesn't actually engage with you. It just sits there shooting, and it creates situations where you can only kill 3 units of summoned clan rats, or you can only kill 85-point units of knight or 65-point units of gutter runners, whilst the vermin lords do some of the surgical work. So them being able to get stuck in with high rend and quality attacks, but also being able to teleport away means that they can be where you need them to be. The army pushes out only a small number of mortal wounds, so it doesn't actually win by killing. But I think an army with 16 units and 145 models, give or take, is going to be pretty big. Relative to other armies. I've seen for instance, some Khorne armies, and I've seen some Slaanesh armies where it's like 40 models, and the models actually aren't that much better than gutter runners. Like, I looked at the war scroll, I was like, yeah, they're an approximation for a gutter runner, but I'm getting 3 times as many models as that guy. So that's good. If I can just play into the other C and D tier armies, that'd be good. So do I think this army could go 5-1 at Cancon? Absolutely not. Do I think this army could give me really, really good reps for screening, for trading, for board control, for scoring in the new objectives? Certainly. And I think the Skaven book is deep enough that Skaven could be a 5-1 list at Cancon. But this particular build, I wouldn't envisage that I'm taking. But certainly I'm looking forward to learning the intricacies and nuance of Age of Sigmar 3 using it. And as I said, I've been painting it for 6 months, so it'd just be really lovely to get it on the table. All right. Anvilguard's Last Stand. This army is a lot stronger than the last one, but equally still feels like it is a little bit off meta and a little bit different to anything else that I've seen people putting out there. So I'll run through it top to bottom. I've done some narrative for this army as well, and the idea is that it's post Marathi. Spoilers here if anyone hasn't read the Marathi book and the fluff for Harkuron, but this is post Marathi sacking Anvilguard and it being overrun by the Daughters of Cain, and it's the last sort of the last stand of the Anvilguard, and it's the Shadow Warriors are going to be Shades and Dark Riders and all this sort of stuff. They're living in the outskirts of Anvilguard, and they've got guerrilla tactics, and they're going to try and have one last glorious victory for Anvilguard and reclaim the city if they can. That's the thinking anyway. So they're headed up by an assassin. He's a secretive warlock, which means that he's got a spell, and it's the Shadow Daggers, which is D6 mortal wounds, but with a short range. Given that he pops out of my units, and he can do that in my opponent's turn, the Shadow Dagger spell could actually be really effective in this build because it's an opportunity to, splash some mortals that my opponent may not necessarily have been expecting in that particular part of the board. He's then supported by a Sorceress on Black Dragon. Obviously, I think monsters, and particularly hero monsters, are really important in this edition, and for that reason the monster's been given the Drakescale Cloak, which gives it a 5-up after save, a ward save. It has the Vitriolic Spray, which is a short range spell cast on an 8, but the Sorceress can get +2 to cast a short range spell, which changes your opponent's save to dash. So that's very important and something we'll talk about later. They've also got the Drake Blood Curse, which is the Foul Gaze, and the Foul Gaze has a range at 12, and it's neg 2 to Bravery. So that one couples with the Horrorghast, which we'll talk about at the end of the list. We've then got a Celestial Hurricanum with a Battle Mage, and that one's got Vitriolic Spray as well. Same spell on +1 to cast, so needs a 7 to hit it. This one gives out a bubble of +1 to hit. So the Dark Shards and Shadow Warriors already have +1 to hit on their War Scrolls, but there is going to be a lot of debuffs to hit in this edition, I think. So being able to go +2, which cancels out their -1, so you're still +1, is going to be really important. And the Hurricanum has a fantastic War Scroll spell and also does mortal wounds with its shooting. So we're starting to couple different ways of getting mortal wounds in so that I can take out some of the units that I haven't Vitriolic Sprayed. It's then got 20 Dark Shards, 10 Shadow Warriors, 10 Shadow Warriors, 7 units of 5 Dark Riders, and the Horrorghast, and comes in at 1,995 for a cheeky 5-point Triumph bid. Now, I've said this army is hidden agents. That's plus D3 command points at the start of the game. If that one has to be used in the first battle round or words to that effect, I'll probably swap it to the second artifact, and the Celestial Hurricanum will also get the 5-up ward save, and they'll get the 5-up ward save, which is a generic enhancement from the core rules now. So that would mean both of my big sort of important casting units would have a 5-up after save, which is obviously very important in this edition. So this army I like because it has multiple different victory conditions. So when we talk about victory conditions, an army like Idoneth Deepkin historically has had the win condition: keep Volturnus alive by turn 3, and have, at least 2 favourable combats set up for turn 3, and you'll probably be close enough to tabling your opponent or far enough ahead in terms of the body count at that point that you'll win the game through scoring turns 3, 4, and 5, and that was the way that they would win. So as an opponent, you would say, I either want to split the army up so it can't benefit from the buffs that Volturnus is giving out, or alternatively, I want to try and kill Volturnus, which is easier said than done, but that would be the strategies you employ to stop their victory condition coming off. So this army I like because it has numerous victory conditions. Vitriolic Spray coupled with 165 quality shots. Like, Dark Riders have 3 shots each, right? There's 7 units of them moving around the board. I mentioned that the army has a subtle mortal wounds output. Like, it doesn't on paper look like there's a lot, but the assassin can punch him out in the combat phase. The sorceress on Black Dragon has run and shoot, so she can run and then shoot with her dragon, and it's a volume thing. Anyone within range on a 6 takes a mortal. And then the Celestial Hurricanum also has the potential to just snipe out characters because it ignores Lookout Sir with the way that its mortal wounds work. And then the Shadow Warriors themselves, they've only got Rend 1, but it's still valid. It still matters. And then this other win condition that they've got is a Bravery Bomb. So debuffs to Bravery in this list. The Shadow Warriors the Dark Riders rather, all have -1 Bravery within a particular range, and then the Sorceress has -2 Bravery from her Foul Gaze within 12. And then the Horrorghast is a spell which is now cast on a 6. A 6. That's just wild. Cast on a 6 with a range of 12. It can move 8 inches, so it's super fast. Units wholly within 12 can't receive command abilities in the Battle Shock phase. And if they fail their Battle Shock test, D3 additional models flee. That is nuts. You can split your fire up, right? Because it's in their turn. It's like they can't move away from it in their turn. They don't have the opportunity to get away from it in their turn. If you set this up right with the speed you have, the 2 deep strikes of the Shadow Warriors, Dark Shards can run and shoot. Dark Riders, innately are fast and then have crossbows which are longer range than they probably should be. Like, yeah, there's an opportunity there that you could actually Battle Shock off a significant amount of your opponent's army. So, like, the effective range of a Dark Rider is 14-inch move, 16-inch shot, so 30 inches. The effective range of a Dark Shard, though, movement 6, run 6, +1 to run, so 13, and then a 16-inch shot, so like 29 inches for the Dark Shards, and the Shadow Warriors pop up wherever they need to be on the board. So you can do some really, really cool stuff with this. And then Anvilguard, conversely, actually have a really good command ability themselves, where you kill a model from your own army, and then everyone within 18 of that unit is immune to battle shock. So you can get good battle shock immunity in this army as well. So there's the vitriolic spray combined with 165 shots. That is a legitimate way of winning games. There's the horror gas combined with bravery debuffs and the ability to split your fire up so that multiple units are suffering the effects of the horror gas there. And then the third way to win is the same as the previous army, but I think just significantly better, because the Dark Riders are faster, have 2 wounds of pop, and have a 4-up armor save, and that's just, you just flood the board. It's, hold your home objectives, move up, shoot off what you can, and then have lines of screens. So being able to run 5 Dark Riders, because it's a unit of 5 or fewer, where those cavalry bases are spread out across the best part of, an inch between each model, over 2 inches for the base. So they're getting like a 17 or 18 inch spread, and then you can obviously have the next unit sitting 6 to 8, 6 to 10 inches behind them, and so on. So I think there's a real trade game to be had there, and this is an army that I've got, which is predominantly the 4th and 5th edition Dark Elves, and one that I would want not painted by myself, obviously, but painted up to the best painted standard for the whole event. So with this few models, I think you can start to really lean into some nice armies that way. So this is one that I'm going to be testing to see, what is the upper limit of this from a power perspective. But on the face of it, I really like the direction that it's headed in. An alternate take on this, a different way that you could run this list, would be to drop the dragon, to drop the Hurricanum, then to move from this faction over to Harkuron, and replace those 2 models with Marathi. I personally think Marathi is one of the most undercosted war scrolls in Age of Sigmar at the moment, but we'll just have to wait and see how she plays on the table, because I think, if you move over to Harkuron, and then you can make your assassin a priest, and then that opens up the really good prayer that they've got, that could also be a legitimate way to play this list. So something that I'll tease out over the coming months, but certainly something I'm looking forward to giving a go on the table. All right, just to wrap up, let's do some shout outs. So today was really about, can you break the meta? You know what I mean? Can you take an army that's not necessarily considered a prevailing threat, an ascendant army, and can you do something with them? And there's a couple of blokes over in the States that I want to shout out. They've been terrors on TTS, and one is Juwan, who I think is a lad from down in the Florida Keys. I think he's like a Navy man or something. And the other is Noah, who's he's from New York City, and he's like a tunneler. So Noah and Juwan have been taking predominantly squig armies on TTS and just dominating. So those 2 guys, for me, are real inspirations in terms of the type of list I want to build, and they're demonstrative as well of what happens when you get in practice with a list that your opponent is not used to playing. So you have significant reps and your opponent has no practice, no counter moves. You can actually pull off a number of wins because you knew your army better than they did, and that's really cool. So shout out to both those blokes. The next thing I want to do is just give a quick shout out to event organisers. It's been a really awesome last weekend of Age of Sigmar 2. We really went out with a bang, and I think that these guys individually and collectively have copped unwarranted flack online, and I think that is reflective of broader societal expectations to, without getting too quasi-psychological, I think lockdown has enhanced people's entitlement tenfold. So everyone wants to fire shots, but no one actually wants to do the work. So I just want to say Ada Nickel, Marty Orlando, Mortally Wounded, T-Sport Network, followed all of your events last weekend, and they were fantastic. They really motivated me to do hobby, and I really appreciate all the work you put into those. So big shout out to those guys, big love. Next, I want to talk about YouTube tutorials. So I mentioned before that I took a month off gaming, and one of the really cool things you can do if you still want to be connected to the broader scene, if you take a little bit of a break, is to look at stuff like terrain. Like terrain is universal, right? It doesn't matter what the system is. I'm still interested in what terrain you can build at home and what tables you can build and all that sort of stuff. So Terrain Made Easy is a really cool YouTube channel where the bloke basically, I reckon 90% of the stuff he does, he builds for free. He just like grabs old cardboard from his house and he goes to the bin and he goes and looks at what paint he's already got in his shed and all that sort of stuff. And it's really good. It's the sort of stuff that you wanted to make when you were a 13-year-old, right? And you had the delusions of grandeur that you'd be able to make tables that look like White Dwarf. Well, this guy does it, but still just using the dross that he can find around his house. And the other one is Miscast, who's an Australian guy based out of South Australia. And the terrain that he's been making, and he's been getting a bit of an AOS resurgence himself, but the terrain that he's been making on his channel, specifically out of the 6th edition Big Red Book for Warhammer, so the old orc terrain, was just like the nostalgia was overflowing, and it was terrific what he did. So I just wanted to give both those blokes a shout out. Both those channels are like maybe 70 times larger than mine, so they don't need any love from me, but nonetheless I enjoyed them thoroughly, so I just wanted to call that out. And last but not least is a bit of a plagiarism acknowledgement. So Simon's Order Academy, Simon did a fantastic tournament review when he ran an illegal Harkuron list at the previous Brishammer event, and I watched that and I loved it, and I just copied the format exactly for my Ravenhall review, but I never actually gave Simon the shout out that he deserved then. So big love to Simon, and I'm looking forward to catching up with him at Toowoomba Open and hearing about the time his opponent got a double turn, and that's the only reason he lost. So that's me done for today. I'll probably jump back on in about a fortnight. My aim is to maybe get 4 or 5 games of AOS3 in, and then do a bit of a shorter video, about 15-20 minutes, on just some of my impressions from actually playing the game on the table, and some of the things that I learnt through gaming that I didn't learn through reading. So I'm certainly far more of a visual learner than a student, or someone that's able to like study the rules and glean insights out of them. But once I see stuff applied on the table, I'm then able to take that and sort of learn from it. So anything that I'm able to get out of my initial 4 or 5 games, any heartbreak that I can save you guys, I'll be sure to share.